Welcome to Best Practice, a show where we interview leaders in the building industry to unpack the tools, strategies, and tactics they use to run great organizations. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by Meeta Morrison and Kelsey Erwin of MMD Architecture for a fireside chat about how to build an entrepreneurial culture within an architecture firm. MMD Architecture is an award-winning, women-owned, full-service firm that is focused on custom residential, small commercial planning, and master planning and interior design projects in Austin and Central Texas. Meeta holds a graduate degree from the School of Architecture at the University of Texas and a BA in Art and Art History from Rice University. Originally from India, she considers herself a Texan, has established deep roots in the Austin community. Kelsey Irwin joined MMD Architecture in 2021 as business manager to facilitate strategy and operations. She's passionate about design, innovation, and optimization. With her knowledge of construction management, Kelsey helps to keep the team in organization and facilitates all projects. This is going to be a really great conversation about two leaders who are actively thinking, intentionally thinking about and acting on their firm and their culture. So with that, thank you very much for joining us today, Meeta and Kelsey.
Thank you. We're so happy to be here. It's such a pleasure to get the invitation. And I am a fan of Monograph's fireside chats and have listened to them while I'm working. And so, yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had a lot of great conversation behind the scenes about what this conversation will entail, and I'm really excited for how deep I think we'll be able to get. I think to start though, maybe it might be helpful to start with a high-level background on MMD. Meeta,
Sure.
Can you walk us a little bit about your approach to starting this business and like what has been your attitude and what's informed you? And though I think we'll kind of set the context for everything else to come.
So I started my firm as a sole practitioner in 2011. At that time, I was just working for other architects. If you might remember, that time in the economy was not the best for architects. But I had graduated a few years previously from my graduate program. And I was very lucky to work for other entrepreneurial architects who also sort of built their practice, as people who were passionate about design and got to see how different people approached building their practice. In 2013, I incorporated my business and wrote a business plan. So that was really the first business plan was a little bit before that. Part of the business plan was get incorporated. So I did that. And I would say to anyone who's really thinking about, starting their own business, any kind of business really, is write a business plan. And I guess that is one of the key things that I would like to say about starting my firm, Meeta Morrison Designs, which is now known as MMD Architecture. At its heart, it's a business. And the business that I do is architecture. And so like really putting down my mission, my vision, and how architecture was going to be the business that I was going to do well at. And pretty soon the company did start to grow. In 2016, I went out on my own, as in I no longer took on projects for other architects and started doing my own work. By 2017, I knew that I needed to hire people. So I initially started out by hiring sort of part-time workers, but pretty quickly figured out that that was not really going to be a good solution for me. I hired a consultancy, and they are still our consultancy, to basically help us figure out, and that wasn't until 2019 that I did that, or 20 maybe even. I guess I should have written down the times, but just to say, hey, I want to grow my business. I have all of these projects. I don't have the right type of help. I'm trying to figure out how to do this. And I, handed over what I wanted for the business to be, how I wanted it to grow, told them my mission, my vision, and sort of laid out an idea. they helped me to create a roadmap. And one of the first things they said is, you need to hire a business manager. That should be the first person that you hire. Now, in the beginning, I was a little bit resistant, but then I started to think about it. Many of the firms that I had worked with, they either had someone who was a business manager because they were an architect and that was like their forte, or someone who was even a family member who was just an amazing business manager. And so once I thought about it, I was like, okay, yes, this is the right thing to do. And so that's sort of how the whole process of hiring Kelsey started, and then growing the firm. And so we went from 1 to 3 to 5, and we're getting ready to, I'm not actually sure where we are right now. So yeah, so that's kind of where we are. We've doubled our staff over the last year. We've increased our office space. We were working out of my house until about a year ago, when my husband basically said, you can't work from here anymore. And so, yeah, we're in a great space. I have a great team and really just enjoying it.
I mean, thank you for the great overview. I think it's, for a lot of small firms, what you described is kind of that pause in thinking about, well, do I really need a business manager? Is very common, because I think a lot of firms, just firm owners particularly, want to kind of take it all on, whether that's because like they on one extreme, it could be micromanagement, like just wanting to have a hands on everything. On the other extreme, it might just be sort of insecurity, or the feeling of like, I don't know what I don't know, so I don't know who I should bring on and whatnot. So I'm curious now that with Kelsey on board, like, how's been the working relationship? Where do you overlap, or where is like the core area of focus for you, Kelsey?
Sure. Well, Meeta and I have to say there is a little bit of magic and fate to it. And when you really follow Meeta wrote out this plan. She had a vision for her business. And I mean, there is, I think, a certain amount of the law of attraction that I believe in. But Meeta and I actually met in 2019. And when I had just entered the building industry, I came from a background of project management. I worked in finance and private equity. I've worked in retail management, and the common thread throughout all of those has been management and operations and optimizing the businesses that I've worked for, or the individuals that I've worked for. And so Meeta and I met and really just felt a kindred spirit. And then we were at lunch one day, sort of, nearing end of pandemic. I had worked for a builder and had just had my second son, and was wondering what would be sort of the right fit. I didn't know that going back into construction would be the right fit. So we were at lunch, and that was when she mentioned that she was looking for a business manager. And like I said, the spark was there. We have a great connection. Meeta and I use a little bit of different operating systems that I've picked up throughout my career, whether that's the EOS Entrepreneurial Operating System, or the 4 disciplines, or the entrepreneurial culture. And we take the parts of those operating systems that really feel like they work well for us and have created our own. And so while the EOS system tells you that you should have a visionary and an integrator, and when you look at the business, you would think owner and architect of the design side is the visionary, and I on the business operations side am more of the integrator. But really those roles, and then of course the EOS tells you you can't have 2 visionaries, and it won't work. But really Meeta and I are a little bit of both in each role that we play. I come in and we work together as visionary and integrator on the design side, but we work as visionary and integrator together on the operating side. And we really think that both of those go hand in hand, and the way that we design our business affects the way that Meeta and the team designs and how it works for our clients.
So I think that I want to expand on all of the things that Kelsey said. So certainly there was that spark, because I had reached out to my consulting team before I was going to go to lunch with Kelsey, and I knew that she had just recently left a position that she had been in, and I was pretty excited, actually. So I reached out to Optio and said, hey, I think I'm going to offer Kelsey a position. And they said, well, would you like us to interview her? Would you like? And I said, no, I just have a gut feeling about that. This is the right thing for me and for this business. And she came out to the house because my office was here. We sat on the front porch, and what I really appreciated was her professionalism. Like, she basically, talked about what she wanted out of the business for her personally, and what she wanted out of the business for the business itself. And that's sort of how I think as well, so there was definitely this alignment on how we both think up our own goals and of the goals of the business. So that was really, really cool. And I
had come from a background as well in my project management, but right before the pandemic, I had started my own small company, an owner's rep firm, and had started doing some projects and managing those for the owner. And so was familiar with the process. I had done a renovation at my house, but, I had this I have an entrepreneurial spirit, I think, in everything that I've ever done. And Meeta and I even got together during the pandemic for coffee on her porch at one point, and we were bouncing around different ideas of how we thought our individual businesses would grow at that point, and how were we going to survive this, of the not being able to network as easily. And then there were conversations about what the future would look like. And we said, we know we're going to work together in some capacity at some point. And so stars aligned, and here we are. And I think we've come so far in just the past year, in where we had all of these ideas that were floating around up here about what the business should look like, what it could look like, where we wanted to take it. And we were just having the conversation earlier this morning about, look how far we've come and what we have implemented in that short period of time that is going to allow us to achieve great things.
George, I'm going to just say one thing. So you said something that just made me think about, the letting go, so that if you really want to grow, it is like you have to jump out of a plane without a parachute. And at some point, you have to take that risk in allowing other people to do what they're good at. You identify what people are good at, and then just let them do it. Because what is the point of bringing on people into an organization if you're not going to do that? And so that, I think, is part of being entrepreneurial. It's just like, you just have to sort of let it go,
Yeah, I think I'm really excited about this, because we can take these ideas about, these operating systems that you're talking about, Kelsey, the visionary and the integrator, or really the person who's setting maybe strategy, and versus the person who's like making the engine run and like actually executing on that strategy, and take these ideas and actually maybe talk more about how you get alignment. Because I think part of the idea about letting go is trust ultimately, right? So you also have to find people that you trust. And obviously, Meeta, you found someone to trust in Kelsey before you made that offer. So there was a relationship and that was built over some time. But even then, there's also these other kind of checks and balances in place that, Kelsey, it feels like you brought to the table to bring accountability, so that like that trust can also persist. And so I'd love for maybe to talk a little bit about how, like, what does the cadence look like for you in order for both of you to be in continuous alignment? And we've talked about the Monday morning meeting. Maybe that's something, a way we can kind of expand a little bit about, because I think for people, it's helpful to understand, okay, so yeah, there's the person who's the visionary, there's the integrator, but then how do you actually apply that
How do
on
you
a
make it
day-to-day
work?
basis? Yeah.
What are the, and Meeta and I talked about that this morning. We're like, what are the takeaways that we could give people from this structure that we've put in place to go and implement tomorrow in their own business, in their own practice, that will start to make small changes for them and help them leverage to meet their goals. And one of the things that we were talking about is when I first started working with Meeta and MMD and we were at her house, we would get together every morning and meet, and we would start building out sort of this to-do list and how are we going to achieve the goals for the week, and really just writing notes down and to-do lists. And ultimately, and very quickly realized that it's not going to work if it's just you and I, and we're handing out orders. We need to bring in the rest of the team into this. And that's where the Monday morning meeting developed. The private equity firm I had worked at, they did Monday morning meetings. The EOS system calls it L10, and MMM felt very fitting for MMD architecture. And so I'll let Meeta talk a little bit about how we started to develop that cadence.
So I think that the pandemic had a little something to do with this in a weird sort of way, because for a while I had several team members working remotely for me. So even before Kelsey came on, and it was really difficult for me to let go, to let them do stuff. And so I would meet with them on Zoom, but you can't be on Zoom 8 hours a day. You just can't. You're not going to get anything done. And so when Kelsey came on, she saw all of these meetings on my calendar, and she's like, okay, this is really not, and I was also complaining, is like, I never get to design. And so she's looking at the calendar and going, well, this is why. And can we just reduce this to, once a week? And at first, I resisted. I was like, well, I don't know if we're going to be able to do that. But I said, okay, let's try it. And we did. So we meet on Monday morning. We discuss like the overarching goal for this firm, for the team.
And we take that from the 4 disciplines in which they call WIGs, wildly important goals. So we have set that as sort of an annual goal, or you definitely put a timeline on it. Is it measurable? Is there a deadline? One of the very first presentations I gave when I joined the firm, Meeta, was to remember goal setting and yes, how to set an effective goal. And many people set goals, but is it measurable? Is there a deadline? What are the tasks that you're going to do to actually achieve that? So we set annual and quarterly goals for ourselves.
We do. And then the goals are not just for the firm, but they're also for each individual person in the team. And they get to set those goals. So to help implement those goals, we also give the team members a stipend to pursue education. As in any, I hope it would be in architecture or some aligned field. I do encourage all of my designers to get licensed. And then if Kelsey wants to pursue something that would make her a better operations person, then I would applaud that. So each of the team members has a goal. And what we ask them to do is, think about a timeline for that goal. And I think that sort of is the culture that we're trying to promote. It's like, we're a very goal-oriented firm. Like, we're not just doing projects. We're like, okay, by the end of the year, we're going to have this many projects that are under construction. We're going to have this many projects that are commercial, this many projects that have a certain budget. And do we always hit all of our goals? No, but it's sort of like the business plan. It's like, if you never even write down your goals, you don't have a chance.
And I think, and I see here in the chat that there is a question coming in about, how we are pretty cohesive in the way that we operate, but how do we handle that conflict or internal or external firm issues, or maybe it's project issues. And that is a portion of the entrepreneurial operating system, and in the MMM or L10 as they call it. So when we're running the meeting, we're going through the goals, yes. And then the next section of the meeting is, okay, what are our measurables? What are our lead and lag measurables? What have we done last week that is going to push us forward to where we want to be? And those are not easy to define. Measurables are very difficult, and we're still dialing in on what those are. And then we go through each of the projects. And while it can seem like an exhaustive process, we try to have a monthly goal and a weekly goal for each project. And then from that weekly goal comes the weekly to-do list. And each person who is on the project, we encourage our team members and our team leads to be able to speak to each project that they're on. And going through, Meeta and I have discussed other ways to do it. Like, we could go through the lead and the lag measures on our own and not involve the team in this, but in creating that entrepreneurial culture, it's the openness, it's the transparency, like to know what the ultimate goals are and what the measurables are for the firm empowers your employees to maybe do a little bit more that's just on that weekly checklist and take ownership. And like Meeta was saying, the educational stipend, like how are we allowing them to meet personal goals and growth by sharing the firm's goals and growth? And so when we run through the to-do lists, of course, there are always things in projects that are roadblocks, or we've got to solve for this. And so in going through those to-do lists for the week, we can kind of move those issues to a section of the meeting that really need to be discussed. And how are we going to overcome this? And having it all in a document in front of you also allows you to say, okay, this is not a goal this week. This is not a problem we have to solve this week. We can push that to next week.
Huge. Yeah. I love that prioritization is baked into it. Not everything is a fire. Like, there's certain fires that can burn, that you can leave burning because they just are not as important as others. And I think I'm curious then, so do the goals that employees set, are they only limited to personal goals, or are there goals that they're setting also that relate or ladder up back to company goals? Actually,
it is a little bit of both, because now you have to remember we are a very young firm. So, we're setting systems into place. One of the things that happened last week that I was so excited about, and you're going to think, what, are you crazy? So one of my junior designers came to me and said, I looked at the schedule and I looked at all of my, to-dos, and there is no way that I'm going to finish the construction documents for this project by Friday. So I sat down and looked at her schedule, and indeed, she would not be able to do it. Now, why would that make me so happy? Well, because she had the wherewithal to figure out what her responsibilities are. So she is paying attention to the goals of the company. And the way that we make that happen actually starts with the way that we treat our clients. So what I was describing about, getting projects, I think we talked about this in an earlier conversation. When we interview a client, or they interview us, however you want to talk about it, we describe to them what we do. The first thing we ask is, have you worked with an architect before? And usually it's no. And when they say no, we tell them how we approach their project. What are the systems we have in place that is going to help them bring their project in? What's the first thing they ask? How much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? So those are things that we bake into the design process. We bake it into the proposal. all of our design team is welcome to read the proposal. In fact, this morning I gave a new project to our senior designer and said, please read the proposal so that you can understand what the client is expecting. Because how can I ask a designer to work on a project if I have to constantly go back and tell them what to do? Yes, we redline, like every other firm, we redline, but I would actually like to teach my designers to redline.
And they've started to do so. I mean,
Yes.
they've started to redline for one another. And so they are taking that initiative because they've been given the information, because there is an open door policy. And really kudos to Meeta for, she's the one who created that environment that allows for an entrepreneurial culture, because without her vision of what she wanted the business to look like, and without letting go and letting me come in and take a little bit of that control to help put some of these measures in place, these structures, you know, we wouldn't be able to do, I wouldn't be able to do what I do best if it weren't for Meeta to allow that and to recognize that in people. And it just strengthens your commitment to the business, quite frankly. You know, not only is it a place that you want to come to work, but you want to see the business succeed. You're not just taking home a paycheck, and really everyone is accountable for that. And you know, going back to the goal setting and the personal goals and the company goals, this is something else that came from my experience in the private equity firm. Is we have quarterly check-ins, you know, and putting in sort of these review processes. So at the end of the year, you're not like, oh my gosh, I'm getting this annual review or sit down, but I haven't had these check-ins with the owner and architect throughout the way to track my progress. And so through the Monday morning meeting, through the goals, through the lead and lag measurables, like we encourage our employees to go out and to network or to hit these milestones. And so that is just helping them in their career growth and knowing where they stand in the firm through quarterly check-ins as well as the weekly meeting.
And I guess what I would say is that if they do, so the most important thing in the firm is not me. It's the team. And if the team does not succeed, is not good, then that affects the firm, right? And so, and it is my most expensive resource is my team. It costs so much money to train people, to retain people, to keep people happy where they are. It is totally worth it, you know, to make sure that that's what we're doing, because if I have, you know, people, if there's a revolving door where people are coming and going, it's very hard.
Training is one of the biggest costs any firm can incur. And, you know, in speaking to that and going back to the clients also in the training is like, how are we communicating how to work with us as a firm to our clients to keep them all the way through a project, you know, to not nix a project, especially in an economy that might be a little bit volatile, where projects and construction costs are way more expensive than they thought they were going to be when they started thinking about a remodel in their head 2 years ago. You know, how are we providing that training on how to work with our firm into our proposals, into our introductory questionnaire that asks if they've ever worked with an architect, and not only training employees, but training clients on how to work within a structure that is beneficial for them.
What's amazing is like there's these things that you're describing that are seemingly very simple to implement, but that have huge impact. I mean, even just like, let alone, I mean, one of the things that one of my soapboxes is that annual reviews are broken alongside most mentorship in firms, larger firms particularly, because like the organization is just not really structured to really provide mentorship. So you have these kind of ad hoc things. But by having a quarterly check-in in place, what you're doing is like and I think along with the weekly meeting with the whole team, that feedback that would normally have to surface all the way at the end of an annual review, annual meeting with very little context, and probably no growth along the way is happening every week in such an iterative cycle. I mean, where you can make decisions faster that have huge impacts. I mean, even the fact that, like, I'm so curious is like, when did even this idea of redlining, where like the team members are redlining each other's work, like how long of a conversation was that even to just implement, or was that just a one meeting being like, hey, we should just try, like, everyone should just try redlining and see what happens?
I think that the way that I redline might be a little bit different, partly because we use Revit. I think somebody asked a question about that. I've been using, I'm an early adopter. I started using it in 2006 because I've always known that I want to go for certain types of project, and I'm really interested in technology as a solution for making better architecture. Redlining in Revit isn't quite the same as AutoCAD, because since each drawing is a separate entity in AutoCAD, you have to redline every single drawing for the change to, be all the way across the board. And while to some extent that is true in Revit as well, because once you print out the pages, you're looking at them as separate entities, a lot of times it really has to do with the way that the model is constructed. And so you can't just, X out a line. It's really a conversation with the designer saying, hey, I think that the way that this is constructed is creating this challenge across the document set, And so that conversation is something that I have with my designers. So even when I do like the standard redline, I redline the set, here you go. And it's like this stack of papers with red marks all over it. And sometimes they're really excited to get that. But I think actually they really enjoy that session where we sort of are talking about how things are built. Because when you start talking about how the model is not working, a lot of times you are actually talking about how things are built. So it sort of goes back to that idea of learning and teaching, and yeah, my design team teaches me too. So it's not like it's all like my brain dumping on everyone. It goes all different directions. So I hope that answers that question. I think I may have veered a little bit.
No, I think at the core is this like intention around what are the most important meetings that one can have as a team together, and that have leverage, right? That like you just do it once and your outcome is 10x because you did that important meeting. And the Monday morning meeting is one, and it seems like this kind of redlining session, the way that it's structured, is another form. And just for me, it seems like a really actionable takeaway for people that are listening. It's like, if you reevaluate your calendar with your team and you really think about how to set up systems in place that allow you to be iterative and improve on a faster cadence than an annual review on one, at the personnel level, or even quarterly at the company level, where it's like on a weekly basis, you're talking about how are we doing towards our goal. It has a huge impact. And maybe you can speak a little bit more to that, Kelsey.
Yeah, I'm shaking my head. I'm like, yes. You hear it in business all the time, and people, it can become a catchphrase, but time is money. And not only is our time in the office money, but our clients' time is their money too. As if we're billing on a fixed fee or if we're billing hourly on a project, we have to be cognizant of how are we going to spend our time in the office to make this project profitable and to not go over budget. What are the tasks that are going to keep us from doing that? And how are we going to use our clients' money effectively? I mean, I think aside from that part, everyone can agree in any industry that there's nothing worse than sitting in a meeting and walking away from that meeting saying, this could have been an email, or what did we accomplish? And so as we've continue to put systems in place. Even for our client meetings, we're starting to create meeting agendas for every meeting that say, and starting to send it to clients in advance of the meeting and saying, okay, these are the things that we hope to cover, and sort of following that and creating roadmaps for everything that we do so that our time is used as efficiently as possible, and that translates into dollars. And so, just making sure that, are we efficient in the way that we use our meetings and our time?
I think one of the things that that really started to inform how I wanted to structure the design process. So we're talking about two different things that actually affect each other. The design process and the business, and they have to speak to each other. So in a sense, we are designing the business, but we're also designing the design process. So what does that mean? So like we have templates for everybody has templates for their drawings, right? Everybody has their title blocks and so on. We have that, but we have templates for, how we present a pre-design meeting. And that's one of the things that we started doing early on. Small firms often include pre-design as part of a schematic design process. We do not do that because what I found is that, oftentimes I'm spending so much time doing pre-design because there were multiple issues involved in just being able to begin a project. There's property issues, there's flooding, there's some sort of weird zoning that this particular lot is in. I've even had cases where the neighbor had their house on the client's lot. And there's so many things that will be really helpful in making the rest of the process go smoothly. So
we keep saying it, we keep going back to it, but this pre-design document that we've created and separating out the pre-design phase is a roadmap for the project that then in turn empowers the designers to go back and refer to this document, whether it's the project timeline, the list of deliverables, the meetings that we're going to have, what is the permitting process, that empowers them to be able to take the design into the next phase.
But it also empowers the clients because, we have things on this roadmap, like we need your feedback, because I have always found it really interesting. It's like, we'll say, well, we'll have a meeting in 3 weeks and I don't get the feedback until 3 days before the meeting is. And so that doesn't
You're
really
like, you can't just whip this up overnight.
And so, in the beginning, I did that because I would stay up all night and do it. I don't do that anymore because I can't, for one thing, physically, I'm not able. And then two, the client has a responsibility to, how they spend their time and how much they're committed to the project. So, it's like if they take 3 months, which we've had that happen before, or 2 months deciding on what they want, we cannot guarantee that their project will still be on our roster, and they will have to pay us to review their drawings.
Sometimes it feels a little bit like we have to play bad cop every now and then. We have wonderful clients, so rarely is that the case. But in training people how to work with you and setting those standards for how we're going to move your project along, again, it saves the client time, it saves the client money, because if your project goes on hold for a certain amount of time, we've told you in the proposal that there will be a restart fee to review those drawings. If we do not get your feedback by X date that we put on the tentative timeline, sure, things shift a day or two, a week or two. We can't control if it rains for 60 days, during construction, but we can't, necessarily control exactly when the engineering documents will come back. But if we lay out this cadence from the beginning, it's like, you do your part, we'll do our part. And then here's when we expect to permit. And then here's from our experience when we expect to get comments back on the permit and move the project along.
Is there anything that you Do you have rules of thumb, or is there a way when you early on when you're first talking to a client where you can vet out their capacity for decision making? Meaning, like, can you identify, oh, this is a tire kick, like they're gonna take a very long or very indecisive, or and that impacts your kind of no go decision on whether you want to pursue a client, or does that not really factor in? And you really your solution for that is just being super explicit about all these things, and that's how you've been able to manage that.
I would say that that is part of the solution, because what I found is that the tire kickers fall off fairly quickly when they get, when they get the marching orders, essentially. And, I mean, that's if we get to schematic design.
Well, and I
Now,
would say a system that Meeta implemented well before I ever got to MMD architecture was our introductory questionnaire. I mean, so often you'll go to a website and they're like, oh, fill out this form to contact us. And we have a contact form too. However, when we receive a contact form, Meeta had created the first system long ago to help alleviate some tire kickers of the questionnaire, which includes that question, have you ever worked with an architect, among many others that help us gauge what type of client.
like,
That's
will
fantastic.
will you engage other professionals if they're needed? And like an interior designer, and so obviously we're listing the things that most people expect a structural engineer. So that's usually not something that people will say, I don't want to hire a structural engineer. But sometimes we need a geotech or a civil or, landscape architect, or there's all sorts of things that people want. They want us to design, very specific type of lighting, and that is outside the scope of work that we're going to do. So we have to have that conversation very early. So the process of onboarding a client, like to the point where we actually write the proposal for them, we take our time, like figuring out what that is. We discuss it with the team. Actually, we talk about, it's like, how is this going to fit into our schedule? Is this a project that we want to do? So that is like part of the process of bringing a project on.
That's amazing. Well, I think we're going to try. We have a healthy list of questions here that we might want to transition to. Some of them have been already, and feel free to drop
I
any
love
more
the
questions.
last one here. Meeta and I were having this conversation earlier today, as a matter of fact. So Meeta, take that one, because when I saw it pop up, I was like, oh yeah, we were just talking about that.
So, so I have been volunteering since I was in 8th grade. Like, this is something that has been, passionate for me. And would I say that my volunteering is like in any one particular sector? Not necessarily, but I am very interested in the issues that women face, especially as it comes to raising children and education. So those are the things that I would consistently volunteer for. And then my background is as an artist. So I volunteered at organizations that promote the arts in some way. And typically the organizations that I volunteered with or sat on the board of, they would be organizations that actually have programs that benefit education for children in some form or another. I have to say that the last few years have been very difficult for volunteering. It became incredibly difficult for everybody during the pandemic to really do anything other than give money, maybe, be able to go somewhere and be outside and do something, those type of things. But now, and then we became incredibly busy. But this was a conversation we were having yesterday. It's like, I miss doing this, and I want to go back to volunteering in my community. It's really important to me.
Yeah. And we, and I think in that sense, there's a way, I think this goes back a little bit to that fate and magic, because I also grew up with community service background. I went to a school that required a specific number of volunteer hours to graduate. In the private equity world, before entering the building industry, I was running a corporate social responsibility program that was geared towards working with students and educating students on computer science and getting into coding. And so while we both have a service-minded background, we were also talking about, we were actually just competing in a charity sandcastle competition this weekend. So we helped raise $6,000 for Meals on Wheels of Central Texas. But as related to networking, volunteering is so important in industries, both architecture related and outside of the architecture industry. You never know where a project is going to come from or a lead. And so that is something that Meeta and I have focused on, as well as volunteering in arenas that aren't necessarily architecture driven, but broadening your circles. And then as far as architecture related volunteering, we were just talking about that as it relates to additional streams of revenue. And maybe you get a chance to do some pro bono work, some volunteer architecture work that can give you experience on a different type of project that you haven't worked on before. That can lead to new streams of revenue for your company and future projects. And
also just make you feel good, you know? So I do think that the community aspect is really important. And as you spend so much time getting your architecture degree, and you know, Kelsey also has a degree and is very educated, as you can tell. Is incredibly accomplished, and it is a blessing to be able to have that in my life, you know, and then in some way to be able to give back is really important. I don't know if that came out exactly the way that I was thinking it, but I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to become an architect. You know, I'm an architect. It's great. And I would really like to figure out what I can do that can do something for people who maybe don't have that opportunity. So
I think there's an interesting question here that just popped up too, related, which has more to do with for employees. Like, do you foresee that, like, it's also an involvement of employees as well to volunteer with nonprofits? Like, do you support that within the company? If so, I think some of the questions that people have ultimately come down to like the kind of the trade-offs of billable and non-billable time. So once you decide to go back into architecture volunteer, how are you making those calculations? Is it just kind of part of your model for how you think about it from a non-billable perspective? Curious, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think that this is something that we still need to discuss in the firm and figure out exactly how we're going to approach it. So the conversation for us is fairly new. Although we have both volunteered our time, you know, we're asking our employees to volunteer. Yes, that is definitely a question. So like while I'm saying that I will, you know, help to fund education in some way, how does that apply to volunteerism? I don't know yet. I don't know the answer. I don't have the answer to everything about the firm yet. And you know, like we said, it is an iterative process.
We are continuously refining our processes and how we do things and how we make it better. And I mean, that's something that has always driven me, and sometimes almost to a fault if you ask friends and family, perhaps, but this perfectionist level, but sort of like, if you don't shoot for the stars, you can't hit the moon sort of thing, or if you don't aim for perfectionism. So how can we continuously make each experience better? How can we make each client meeting better? How can we make each Monday morning meeting feel more efficient? I think it's a challenge. It's always a challenge, and something that we're continuing to solve for, of how to balance billable and non-billable time. One of the things that I really heard Meeta say when I came to work for her is that she wants to help educate the next generation of architects. And if you stick someone at a desk and you're like, you can only bill time and you can only do window details and you got to get these red lines and that's all, that doesn't help them grow, and it doesn't commit them to your firm. and
Well,
help.
and also it doesn't help the profession, right? Because if we are constantly having to educate our clients, and I mean, this is going to sound negative and I'm trying not to be, but oftentimes people don't really see the value of architects. They don't see what we do. But is it really their fault if they've never really been told what we do? And so if we have a whole generation of people that are working in this profession and they don't know anything other than that they have to finish this set of red lines, how is that serving the community at large? So, and that can be taken a lot of different ways, but that's just like, for me, something personally that I think that by improving something in what I can influence, maybe it will change the way people look at the profession. So,
I mean, it's just not often that one requires the services of an architect in general.
that is correct.
At least the way that it's been also formally described to folks. I mean, we're big proponents here at Monograph of this idea of the expanded architect, meaning that architectural thinking can influence not just the design of buildings, but other designs as well, designs of other systems even. So another question here would be, I think there's an interesting question about write-offs here from Melanie, because this is actually very common, right? The people think about writing off hours when it comes to the system. Like, is that even part of your system in any way, right? Like, because that's a decision a firm is making to say, like, oh, I'm going to write off hours or not. And we're always fascinated, at least from the Monograph perspective, about this particularly because it is very interesting how sometimes the transaction of value is sort of exchanged, like how firms perceive value and they get paid versus what they decide to charge for or not charge for. And so how explicitly defined is that as a rule or as a system for MMD?
Are you asking from the perspective of taxes, or are you asking from the perspective of just?
I think billing,
right?
in a
So
way.
like
And I have this on my mind because we're coming up on tomorrow's the last day of the month. So invoicing is right around the corner.
Yeah.
So yeah, me to go ahead on that. I think it has to do a lot with the commitment to our clients and are we providing that value and really honing in like what, and it's easier for a smaller firm. Like, was that really billable time? Having a conversation with the designer, like how much do you think was research? How many think? And part of my job, we always laugh that we're going to do like an Instagram reel with one of those green visors and me with a numbers machine going, because I'm always combing through time cards and Monograph and making sure our activities are billed to our hours are billed to the right activity. Have our employees been putting in the notes section sort of exactly what they were doing? We're not asking for a novel, but bullet out what you were doing so that when we do have to go review those invoices, or at the end of the month, we see an invoice and we're like, wow, that was a lot larger than we thought. Where are we backing off on hours if we have to? Was it training? Was it research? And just it's always a balance though, right, Meeta? I mean,
I agree. And I think that the question is also deeper than that, because again, it comes back to just thinking about, what do I want this firm to be? I want to provide really great design. I want clients to come back to me, and they do. And, until recently, we had never advertised before. Most small firms don't, because you don't really have the budget. But we have clients refer their friends to us, and clients come back to us for projects, 10 years later, because they want to do a new project. And so obviously what we're doing, being thoughtful about how we spend the money that the client has relegated to us, is important. Those notes that Kelsey is talking about, we do them in Monograph actually, and being able to look at the work log is super helpful. We have had clients come back to us and say, why did it cost so much for whatever? And we can literally pull up the log and say, we met with the historical consultant, we met with, you know, the civil engineer, we went to the city, we researched the traffic patterns, whatever it is. And all of a sudden, you know, they have a list this long.
And they were like, wow, you know, that
Yeah.
happened recently. We did, you know, we had been saying, please put your notes in Monograph, you know, and starting to make that a best practice. It was working. And we came up on a situation of where we actually did need to provide a little bit of clarity for the client. And they were like, okay, awesome. Thank you so much. So
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like deeper things that are part of this process that we're very interested in as a company, and our design team and our product team is very interested, because it does probably point to a disconnect in general, just in terms of like the broader software landscape that we've been looking at and trying to really think actively about, which is basically between contracts being the real source of a project, the work that's being done, mostly being today, which is being captured in tasks, and then the feedback loop that then improves future contracts.
Mhm.
And so
Yes.
I think what's great about the way that you've described how even the proposals are very transparent, like I'm assuming the contracts are by extension also transparent with the whole
Yes.
team. There is this ability to be able to reflect back on, you know, how do we improve then? Because the awareness is now, it's no, before in a world in which you didn't have that transparency, that would be kind of left up to the project manager potentially, who wasn't like really in the weeds as much. But but the fact that it's team wide, you can go back and reflect on that project and say, hey, for the next time that we do a project of this type, of this size, we're just launching square footage in Monograph, so you'll be able to drill down into that as well. Of this size, you can go and say like, hey, like we actually need to go back to that project and make sure that we're capturing all these things that we did
Mhm.
as part of like a template or something, right? So that again, you're also using that to completely go full circle and iterate. And I think that's kind of where what's great to hear from you is that it's also like, you know, software won't solve everything. Some of these challenges are really, I mean, to the point of like, you have to set up types of meetings in order to solve the larger operational issues that you
Well,
might
you're
have.
sort of singing our song, really,
Yeah.
because we are very mindful of just this whole, you know, idea of we have to define what the process is. Well, like one of the things that we ended up doing and is realizing, so, you know, how we talked about pre-design a little while ago. One of the things that we learned is that we were consistently, and it was almost like to the dollar, needing to allocate double the amount that we were actually allocating to pre-design. And, you know, we tried to be like as efficient as possible, but it was just coming back to that same number. And so we have to pass that on to our clients and say, this is what it costs.
And it's one of those scary things that you say, oh my gosh, okay, we've been proposing sort of this estimated fee for pre-design. We've realized through our tracking, through our systems that, wow, we're spending about double that. How do we, you know, catch up and not have to take those funds and reallocate them from other phases? And it's a little bit scary to then say to your clients, okay, well, we thought it was going to be this. And, you know, not somebody under contract, but even a new client, when you're pitching your fees, you're like, oh, this is a little scary. Are they going to be okay with that? And we're finding that they are, and they really see that value in the pre-design. And, you know, Meeta and I, one of the very first things that we started working on when I came to work here was our proposals. And we've been continuously refining those for well over a year on how do we communicate the phase and what is involved and what is delivered in each phase through the proposal. Because
Kelsey, I think I actually hired you to do that before you actually came to, like, that was one of the first projects we did together. I was like, I have to write this proposal. I could really use your help. And that was one of the first things we did together.
And
actually.
I've written proposals before, but we do look back at that one and laugh a little bit because so far.
Always improving. That's the mantra. Well, we are at time, a little bit over time actually, but I do want to ask one last question, which is our favorite question to ask our guests here, and it's what's the nicest thing anyone's ever done for you? And that it can be taken both from a personal perspective or from a professional perspective, but it really gets back to the core of like at the end of the day, we're people, and we have to, business is business, but we're still human. So maybe Kelsey, do you want to take this question first?
I do. I thought it was going to be really hard. I was like, oh my God, what am I, the nicest thing anyone's ever done for me? But it's come from a couple of people, and Meeta definitely being one of them, is when someone gives you an opportunity, it is one of the most valuable things that you can get.
I'm gonna cry.
I'm gonna cry. No, we do get emotional, but I think, on a couple of different levels with a couple of different people, I think the nicest thing I've ever been given is an opportunity, and I certainly try not to waste that. So.
I have to say that the answer is fairly similar for me. Trust is something that, so in terms of business, like what Kelsey has given to the business is like a devotion to make the business work. And so I know she has my back. Like, I don't have to think about that. There's not like this, there's no worry for me. On a personal level, I'm just very lucky to be surrounded by family that just really gives it their all for me all the time. And I think Kelsey has that as well. And that is, I believe, is where the feeling of trust sort of germinates from there for me.
We laugh. In another life, we might have been family.
Yes.
Well, what's that saying? Like family is people that you, I forgot it, but I've heard it's probably in a commercial for a sappy soap about families, the people that we made along the way or something. But I just want to thank both of you. I think this is, I love conversations that are what I call like high insights per minute, where there's just like so much to take away and to apply. And I think this is one of those conversations. So I really appreciate both of you for joining me here today, as well as all those that are listening in and that have asked great questions that some of them we couldn't get to, but really appreciate it. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day and stay safe out there.
Thank you so much, George. And if anyone reached out to ask a question and it wasn't answered, please reach out to us.
Oh yeah, what's the best way?
The best way is to just email me, meeta@mmdarchitecture.com. Very easy.
Awesome. I'll just put that here in the chat for.
Yes. And it's same for me, Kelsey@mmdarchitecture.com. We're happy to continue the conversation via email, provide mentorship. I think that's so important, but just really thank you for the opportunity today, George.
Thank you so much. And
Thanks
thank you to the audience as well. Take care.
All right. Take care, everyone. Cheers.